barefoot man runs across a rooftop in Medellin with a pistol in his hand. Another bleeds out on an operating table, his face destroyed by the surgeons. And a third has been dead for 7 years and no one on the planet knows it. All share one thing. They were the most powerful criminals in the world, and all met an ending none of them could have imagined. 12 bosses, 12 deaths, from the streets of Harlem to the jungles of Colombia, from the golden palaces of Myanmar to the carnivals of Mazatlan. And a warning. Stay until the last one, because the closing story is the one everyone's waiting for, and the way he fell isn't exactly how the Netflix series told it. But before we get to the biggest of them all, we start with a name you probably never heard. And that's precisely the most chilling part of his story. Nicky Barnes, the ghost of Harlem. In the 1970s, Nicky Barnes was the absolute king of illegal substances in Harlem, New York. He led an organization called the Council, a group of 7 men controlling all trafficking of substances in the most iconic neighborhood of the African-American community. They called him Mr. Untouchable because the authorities couldn't touch him. Each week he earned what a whole family wouldn't see in a lifetime. His fortune reached $50 million. He owned 200 tailored suits, over 100 pairs of handmade Italian shoes, 50 leather coats, a car collection including a Bentley, a Maserati, a Mercedes, and several Cadillacs, and jewelry valued at over $7 million. He was so arrogant that in 1977 he posed for the cover of the New York Times magazine with dark glasses and a defiant smile. The headline asked whether police could prove he was Harlem's biggest trafficker. That gesture cost him everything. President Jimmy Carter saw that cover and personally ordered the full weight of the law against him. Months later, he was sentenced to life without parole. But here's the twist. In prison, Barnes discovered his partners had stolen his empire. His friends were spending his money, and his own wife had betrayed him. Furious, he made the unthinkable choice. Cooperate with the government. He informed on dozens of people, including his ex-wife, Thelma Grant, who did 10 years on federal charges. In return, he was released in 1998 and placed in witness protection with a completely new identity. And here the story turns disturbing. Nicky Barnes vanished. Literally. According to his own daughters, he worked as a Walmart employee in some Midwestern town. He wore sweatshirts and jeans. He drove a used car. He pressed his pants with the same care he once picked $1,000 suits. The man who'd been New York's flashiest criminal spent his final years as an anonymous grandfather who limped and ordered his salmon to go. He died of cancer on June 18, 2012 at 79. But no one knew until June 2019 when his daughter confirmed it by email. 7 years dead and not a soul on the planet knew. The man they couldn't catch ended up the man no one remembered. Kachun Se, the king of the Golden Triangle. Now we travel to the other side of the world, to a story few know but which reshaped the global map of illegal substances. The Golden Triangle is the mountainous zone between Myanmar, Thailand, and Laos, where most of the planet's poppy was grown. And the man who ruled there for decades was Kun Sa, a half-Chinese, half-Shan warlord who was practically illiterate his entire life, but commanded an army of up to 20,000 soldiers and supplied, according to the DEA, up to 60% of the poppy-based substance reaching American streets. Washington put a $2 million bounty on his head. A New York court indicted him for trafficking. They called him the Prince of Death. In 1981, the DEA orchestrated an attempt to take him out, sending a squad of Thai Rangers and Burmese guerrillas to his base. But the operation failed spectacularly. The following year, the Thai army had to move troops from other regions to expel him from Ban Hin Taik because local soldiers were on his payroll. But Kun Sa was a brilliant political operator. He rebuilt across the border in Hmong, Myanmar, presenting himself to Western reporters as a freedom fighter for the Shan people. He chain-smoked, sang Taiwanese pop songs, grew orchids and strawberries at his jungle headquarters, and even offered the United States government a deal. Buy his entire poppy harvest in exchange for investment and development for his region. $210 million in UN aid, 265 in foreign investment and 89 in private assistance. The offer was rejected as blackmail. In 1996, as his power faded through internal conflicts, he negotiated directly with Myanmar's military junta. He surrendered in exchange for total immunity and permission to run legitimate businesses. They let him live in Rangoon with 4 young lovers, mansions, and a fortune estimated at $5 billion. His children ran hotels, casinos, and transport companies. Kunsa died on October 26, 2007 in Rangoon at 73. Diabetes, hypertension, heart problems, and the toll of a life spent chain smoking. He never saw a cell. He was never extradited. Southeast Asia's most wanted man went in his bed surrounded by family. They cremated him 4 days later. At his former Thai headquarters, hundreds attended a memorial for the man who'd built them schools, paved roads, and a 60-bed hospital. Nazario Moreno, El Chayo, the boss who came back. Now you need to understand something about Mexico. In this country, not even a boss's death is final. Nazario Moreno Gonzalez, founder of La Familia Michoacana and later leader of the Knights Templar, proved it in the most surreal way possible. El Chayo was unlike any other criminal leader. Born in 1970 to a peasant family in Apatzingan, son of an alcoholic father and a mother raising 14 children with beatings. He wrote an autobiography called They Call Me the Craziest One. He went through Alcoholics Anonymous, became obsessed with self-improvement, paid for famous motivational speakers, and ended up immersed in Bible study, which sparked a delusional messianism. He forced his men to read his writings, organized spiritual indoctrination, and proclaimed himself the moral leader of an organization that combined religious fanaticism with large-scale trafficking of synthetic substances. In rural Michoacan, chapels were built for him. People prayed to him like a saint. In December 2010, the Calderon government announced El Chayo had been taken out in a clash with federal police in Apatzingan. Problem, they never produced the body. His men supposedly carried him off before authorities could identify him. And for 4 years, the official story was that he was dead. But the rumors never stopped. Mountain residents saw him. Informants confirmed he was still operating. Michoacan's self-defense groups demanded the authorities capture him. In February 2014, one of his financial operators was detained and confirmed Nazario Moreno was alive and active. The Navy launched Operation Lynx in the Tumbiscatillo Mountains. On March 9, 2014, at 4:30 in the morning, Marines spotted a man on a mule. They ordered him to halt. The rider answered with gunfire as he galloped. The soldiers fired back and he fell instantly. This time they recovered the body. Fingerprints, 100% positive. El Chayo had really died one day after his 44th birthday. The boss who came back from the dead ended up taken out riding a mule before dawn. Ignacio Nacho Coronel, the King of Crystal. Nacho Coronel was the third man of the Sinaloa cartel, alongside El Chapo Guzman and El Mayo Zambada. Born in Canelas, Durango, he started his career under Amado Carrillo Fuentes and after his death moved to the Sinaloa cartel, where he took charge of Jalisco, Colima, Nayarit, and part of Michoacan. They called him the King of Crystal or Diamond Grips because he pioneered mass production of synthetic substances. The United States offered $5 million, Mexico 30 million pesos. On July 29, 2010, the Army deployed 150 troops in the Colinas de San Javier development in Zapopan, one of Guadalajara's most exclusive areas. The strange part, that day Coronel was practically alone. No convoy, no visible security. Only Iran Francisco Quiñones Gastelum, his trusted man, and a physical therapist treating an injury. When he spotted the operation, he tried to flee through the garden. He couldn't. He barricaded himself in a room with an M16 rifle and took out an army lieutenant and wounded another. The military response was decisive. 6 bullet impacts: shoulder, arm, thigh, neck, abdomen, and chest. One to the head was instantly fatal. The DEA called his removal a devastating blow, but the autopsy found the body was between 40 and 45 years old, when Coronel was supposedly 55. The inconsistencies were never fully resolved. Ramon Arellano Felix, fall at Carnival, Sunday, February 10, 2002. Mazatlan prepares for the first Carnival parade. Thousands in the streets, banda music, beer, floats. In the middle of that massive party, a white Volkswagen drives the wrong way on Rodolfo T. Loaiza Street in the Zona Dorada. 3 men inside. One carries a fake federal credential under the name Jorge Lopez Perez. His real name, Ramon Arellano Felix, the bloodiest enforcer of the Tijuana cartel and one of the 10 most wanted criminals by the United States, ranked alongside Osama bin Laden for danger. Ramon had traveled to Sinaloa with a crew of gunmen to take out his fiercest rival, El Mayo Zambada. But it was a masterful trap. El Chapo and El Mayo had leaked that Zambada would be at Carnival, knowing Ramon would come for him. When state police stopped the Volkswagen for inspection, Ramon showed his fake credential. But something gave him away. Commander Angel Antonio Arias Torres confronted him. Ramon drew his weapon and fired twice into his chest. The officer was practically finished when he managed to pull the trigger and put a round into Ramon's head. Both bodies lay on the sidewalk in front of a pharmacy, as hundreds of witnesses thought it was just another Carnival brawl. The government took a month to confirm his identity. The first to know were his enemies. And according to Jesus Zambada Garcia's sworn testimony at El Chapo's New York trial, the news gave Guzman Loera a satisfaction few things in life had ever given him. With Ramon gone, his brother Benjamin fell a month later in Puebla. It was the beginning of the end for the Tijuana cartel. Heriberto Lascano, El Lasca, the stolen corpse. If El Chayo's story was surreal, El Lasca's is straight out of a horror film. Heriberto Lascano joined the Mexican army at 16, rose to the GAF Special Forces, trained in Israel and the United States, and deserted in 1998. He was recruited by Arturo Guzman de Sena, Z1, to form an elite enforcer squad for the Gulf Cartel. That's how Los Zetas were born, the most brutal organization Mexico has ever known. Lascano Z3 became their top leader after Guzman de Sena was taken out at a Matamoros restaurant in 2002. Under his command, Los Zetas went from armed wing to independent cartel, terrorizing northeastern Mexico with unprecedented brutality. He's blamed, among other acts of terror, for the Casino Royale fire in Monterrey that left 52 people dead in 2011. Intelligence reports described a man who traveled alone, by bus with a backpack shielded by electronic signal jammers. Legend has it he loved horse races, blonde women, and exotic animals. They said he kept a private zoo where he fed his beasts with the remains of his rivals. On October 7, 2012, Lascano was enjoying an amateur baseball game in Progreso, Coahuila. An anonymous call alerted the Navy about armed men at a sports field. When Marines closed in, Lascano tried to flee in a pickup. The driver went down first. Lascano jumped out and ran. 3 impacts: waist, abdomen, and the fatal one, the back of the neck. 300 meters from his vehicle, Mexico's second most wanted man lay on the pavement. No ID on him, just a switched-off cell phone. But here's the unthinkable. Authorities moved the body to a funeral home in Sabinas, Coahuila. At 1 in the morning the next day, an armed commando burst in, threatened the staff, forced the owner to load the body and that of his bodyguard into a hearse, and drove 66 kilometers to a reservoir where a truck waited to vanish with the bodies. Authorities hadn't even publicly announced it was El Lasca. Confirmation came later, through fingerprints, and months later through DNA compared with remains exhumed from his father's grave in Pachuca. But the body never reappeared. To this day, some doubt it was really him, fueled by the contradictions between the heights reported by the DEA, the Navy, and Coahuila prosecutors. Frank Lucas, American gangster. Frank Lucas grew up in the poverty of the segregated South in North Carolina. By his own account, at age 6, he watched Ku Klux Klan members take the life of his 12-year-old cousin in front of him. He moved to Harlem as a teenager and became a protege of Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, the neighborhood's legendary boss. When Johnson died in 1968, Lucas saw his opportunity. He traveled alone to Southeast Asia without speaking the language, without prior contacts. and negotiated directly with Golden Triangle suppliers to buy product of the highest purity, cutting out the Italian mafia middleman. His product, branded Blue Magic, dominated Harlem. It brought in $1 million a day. He employed only relatives and childhood friends from North Carolina, the country boys, to minimize betrayals. Legend says he smuggled illegal merchandise inside double-bottomed coffins of fallen Vietnam soldiers, though he himself admitted that happened only once. Denzel Washington immortalized him in American Gangster, a film the sentencing judge himself called 1% reality and 99% Hollywood. They caught him in 1975, sentenced him to 70 years. He became an informant, got out in 5, was arrested again for the same thing on a smaller scale, and served 7 more years. Frank Lucas died on May 30, 2019 in Cedar Grove, New Jersey at 88, natural causes, failing health, in a wheelchair his final years. In his last interviews, he expressed public remorse. He said his had been the worst business possible and there was nothing lower a human being could get into. The irony, his rival Nicky Barnes had died 7 years earlier without anyone knowing. Lucas's death made international headlines. Barnes's was a family secret that took nearly a decade to come out. Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, El Mexicano, the Minister of War, Colombia, 1989. The most violent year in the country's history. Plane bombings, the DAS building blown up with a car bomb, presidential candidates taken out in public plazas. Behind much of that violence was Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, co-founder of the Medellin cartel, nicknamed El Mexicano for his obsession with that country's culture, from charros to rancheras. Forbes magazine included him among the richest men in the world. Born in Pacho, Cundinamarca, son of peasants who sold cheese, he dropped out of school in 9th grade. He worked as a waiter, bus assistant, and merchant in Bogotá's San Victorino sector before entering the violent emerald trade under Gilberto Molina, the emerald czar he'd later order taken out alongside 17 others in a single massacre. From emeralds, he jumped into trafficking of substances and co-founded the Medellin cartel with Escobar, Carlos later, and the Ochoa brothers. He had a paramilitary army of 2,000 men. He was one of the main financiers of Colombian paramilitarism and directly responsible for the extermination of the Unión Patriótica. More than 1,000 deaths are attributed to him. He was Escobar's Minister of War, the man who turned the boss's orders into acts of terror. An informant planted by the Cali cartel, Jorge Velázquez, alias El Navegante, revealed his location in Cartagena. When police arrived at a residential complex in Turbaco, Gacha escaped by yacht to Coveñas. He escaped a second time from a ranch in Tolu when he heard helicopters. But the third time, his luck ran out. Helicopters from the Police Special Operations Command chased him down the road between Tolu and Coveñas. The aerial firefight lasted 35 minutes. His guards fell one by one. Gacha abandoned the vehicle and tried to hide in a banana grove with his 21-year-old son, Freddie. The helicopters tracked him from above. A shot hit his foot. He fell next to his son. What happened next is still debated today. The official version says police gunfire ended him. El Navegante claims Gacha shot him a look of rage, raised his hand, brought an explosive device to his face, and detonated it after watching his son die. The body was left with half the head destroyed, completely unrecognizable. It was December 15, 1989. Next to him lay his son and 5 guards. The coffins were temporarily buried in Sincelejo, and the funeral home owner had to sleep beside the grave that night to protect the caskets from the curious. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies. This is perhaps the most cinematic ending of all, and also the most mysterious. Amado Carrillo Fuentes was born in Navolato, Sinaloa, but was forged in Badiraguato, the cradle of the great bosses. He was the nephew of Don Neto Fonseca, one of the founders of the Guadalajara cartel, and grew up under the tutelage of Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, whom he ended up taking out to seize the Juarez cartel and turn it into the most powerful criminal organization in the Americas. He earned his nickname using a fleet of Boeing 727s to move tons of illegal merchandise from Colombia. The DEA estimated his operation generated between $200 and $300 million a week, with 1% going to bribes. He was the most powerful criminal of his era, and unlike Escobar, practically invisible. Very few photographs of him existed. In July 1997, cornered by pressure on both sides of the border and after losing his main operator, General Gutierrez Rebolo, who was exposed as corrupt, Carrillo made a desperate decision: change his face. He checked into the Santa Monica Hospital in Mexico City and Polanco under the false name Antonio Flores Montes. A surgical team led by Dr. Miguel Angel Orozco operated on him for over 8 hours. Liposuction that removed 14 liters of fat and a complete facial reconstruction with induced fractures in the jaw. According to the official version, the surgery was successful. But in the early hours of July 4th, Carrillo woke in intense pain in room 407. They administered a sedative called Dormicum. His heart didn't hold. He was 42. Doubts exploded immediately. The body shown in the coffin kept the mustache intact, impossible after full facial surgery. Close acquaintances insisted the body wasn't the boss. Different skin tone, no known scars, features that didn't match. No public DNA evidence was ever presented. A version circulated that the real corpse was an ex-cop known as El Chiquilin, who served as his double and vanished days earlier. And 4 months later, the 3 surgeons who took part in the operation appeared inside metal drums filled with cement, with clear signs of violent interrogation. Were they silenced to keep the truth hidden? Or was it cartel revenge for alleged negligence? To this day, some swear Amado Carrillo is still alive, retired somewhere abroad with a face no one knows. Griselda Blanco, the Black Widow. Griselda Blanco was the woman who taught Pablo Escobar the business. Born in Cartagena de Indias in 1943, she grew up in extreme poverty in Medellin. She married a document forger at 14. Over her life, she had 3 husbands, and all 3 ended dead, hence the nickname. In the 70s and 80s, she moved over a ton of illegal merchandise a month between Colombia and Miami, unleashing the so-called Cocaine Cowboys War that turned southern Florida into the most violent zone in the United States. The first strike that put her on the map was the removal of German Jimenez Paneso at the Dataland Mall in Miami in 1979. 2 men arrived in a van with the ironic sign, "Happy Time Complete Party Supply," and gunned down the man and his bodyguard with a Beretta and an Ingram MAC-10 machine gun in front of dozens of terrified witnesses. That episode marked the start of a war that left hundreds dead and turned Miami into a combat zone. She's linked to at least 250 killings, and she revolutionized organized crime with a sinister innovation: motorcycle hitmen, a method that spread across the continent and changed how people were taken out in Latin America forever. After nearly 2 decades locked up in the United States, she pled guilty to 3 killings, received 20 additional years but was released in 2004 and deported to Medellin. She lived quietly as a retired millionaire in an apartment in exclusive El Poblado. She bought meat at the neighborhood butcher like any other resident. Colombian authorities had not a single active warrant against her. Sofia Vergara brought her to Netflix decades later and turned her into the most watched streaming phenomenon of its release week. On September 3, 2012, as Griselda waited for her order at Cardizo Butcher Shop, accompanied by her pregnant daughter-in-law, a man around 30 calmly got off the back of a motorcycle, drew a pistol, fired twice, one in the shoulder that pierced her collarbone, and the fatal one, near the right eye, that destroyed her brain and exited through the neck, and walked calmly back to the bike to disappear through the streets of Medellin. Griselda was 69. The irony is so brutal it feels like fiction. The woman who invented the motorcycle hit was taken out in exactly that way. The shooter was never officially identified. Authorities assume a settling of old scores. Arturo Beltran Leyva, the boss of bosses. The night of December 16, 2009, the exclusive altitude development in Cuernavaca, Morelos, turned into a battlefield. And what happened inside that night is one of the most brutal scenes in the history of Mexico's war on organized crime. The Mexican Navy launched a massive operation with helicopters, special infantry forces, and cutting-edge technology to capture Arturo Beltrán Leiva, the boss of bosses, El Barbas, or White Boots. Born in Badiraguato, Sinaloa, like El Chapo and so many others, Arturo grew up in poverty alongside his brothers Alfredo, Hector, and Carlos, and they started as small producers of poppy-based substance before rising to become key allies of the Sinaloa cartel. The relationship broke in 2008 when Arturo believed El Chapo had handed his brother Alfredo, El Mochomo, to authorities as currency to protect himself. 5 days earlier, the Navy had already raided a cartel party at a ranch near Tepoztlan, where Arturo and Edgar Valdez Villarreal, La Barbie, were present. They escaped after a fierce shootout that left 3 gunmen down, 11 arrested, and among the captured were the musicians of Ramon Ayala, Los Cadetes de Linares, and Grupo Torrente. Intelligence located him days later in a luxury apartment in the Elbrus building, inside the Altitude development. Troops deployed by land and air cut the power and surrounded the building. When Marines breached the door, the gunmen were waiting. The first Marine in was hit by a high-caliber round. The firefight lasted 4 hours. There were fragmentation grenades, automatic rifle bursts, and simultaneous attacks on the Cuernavaca military zone and a nearby hospital to divert the operation. One gunman chose to throw himself from a window rather than be captured. Arturo desperately called La Barbie, begging for reinforcements. "Surrender. Why die?" his lieutenant answered, choosing not to intervene and leaving him to his fate. Beltrán Leiva refused to give up and kept firing. When Marines entered the final room, they found an apartment destroyed, walls covered in bullet marks, casings scattered everywhere, furniture in pieces. The boss of bosses lay pierced by dozens of rounds, his arm nearly torn off by a rifle impact. Photos leaked afterward showed something that went around the world: dollar bills placed on and around the body alongside his weapons and jewelry. That detail was a brutal message no one forgot. Days later, 3rd Petty Officer Melquisedec Angulo Cordova, hero of the operation, was taken out alongside members of his family in a retaliation that shook the country. Pablo Escobar, the king. And we reached the name everyone was waiting for. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, the man who amassed a fortune estimated at $30 billion, who declared war on the Colombian state, who blew up planes, buildings, and wills, who was a congressman, a builder of working-class neighborhoods, and the most wanted criminal on the planet at the same time. The boss of the Medellin cartel. After escaping from La Catedral, the luxury prison he himself had built in Envigado in July 1992, Escobar lived 16 months as a fugitive. The Colombian government created the Search Block, an elite unit of the national police devoted exclusively to finding him, funded and technically supported by the DEA, the CIA, and NSA electronic intelligence. In the shadows operated another group known as Los Pepes, people persecuted by Pablo Escobar, made up of Cali cartel allies and paramilitaries who systematically took out everyone around him: lawyers, frontmen, relatives, properties. Escobar was cornered. He lost over 20 kilos. He grew out his mustache and beard. He moved every few hours between middle-class houses in Medellin, sometimes in disguise, sometimes on foot, blending into crowds. His lawyers desperately negotiated a surrender that never came. His wife and children fled to Germany but were deported. They tried to enter other countries, but none accepted them. They were trapped in Colombia, which meant Escobar had to keep calling them. And that was precisely his fatal weakness: the phone calls to his family, especially his son Juan Pablo. Each time he dialed, tracking teams triangulated the signal and tightened the net. On December 2nd, 1993, they intercepted a call from a house in the Los Olivos neighborhood. Escobar was speaking with his son, trying to convince him everything would be fine. The signal led them directly to his hideout. At 3:18 in the afternoon the next day, search block forces surrounded the house. Escobar tried to escape across the roof. He came out barefoot, a pistol in one hand, his hair wild, wearing a blue shirt. They fired. He took 3 impacts, one in the leg, another in the back, and the third, the decisive one, entered behind the right ear and passed through his skull. He was 44. It was December 2nd, 1993. The official version was always that search block agents took him out on the roof. But that bullet behind the ear opened a debate that's lasted over 3 decades. His brother Roberto claimed Pablo shot himself, keeping the promise he'd made years earlier that they'd never take him alive to a cell. His son Sebastian has explored the same theory. Others point to a search block sniper posted on a nearby building. A third line points directly to Los Pepes and their ties to the Cali cartel. The truth most likely went with him onto that roof. What we do know is that one photograph traveled the entire world. The body of the most wanted man on the planet, stretched across the tiles of a middle-class house in Medellin, the blue shirt soaked, bare feet, swollen belly, and the mustache he'd grown during his months on the run. A search block colonel posed smiling beside the body. The image made covers on every continent. That photograph closed an era. 12 bosses, 12 endings. Some went down fighting to the last round. Others were betrayed by those who owed them loyalty. One vanished so well it took 7 years to know he was gone. Another came back from the dead only to fall riding a mule. And the biggest of them all, the man who defeated entire governments, was found because he couldn't hang up the phone. If this journey left you wanting more, you know what to do. Subscribe and ring the bell, because what's coming on this channel will top everything you just heard.